Hi, and welcome to Truth Matters. My name is Lynn, and with this podcast, I'm hoping to shine a light on a range of topics, whether Irish, regional, or global, and whether environmental, cultural, or political. Because the truth matters. In the second episode of Truth Matters, there's another phase on everyone's lips: defence spending, leading to the wars of the world, because the world feels currently like a very volatile place. One facing a climate crisis with biodiversity extinctions happening as we speak, which have been almost forgotten by the current instability and the feeling that the storm clouds of war are gathering on our horizon. I'm going to look at war and weaponry. Where are the wars? Who are the main combatants? Where is military power concentrated? What are the weapons of choice these days? And who makes the money by supplying them? And is peace given a chance? Many of you will be familiar with The Art of War by Sun Tzu, the 6th century BC strategist on warfare, which is used to this day as a primer in many military academies. However, he wasn't one to launch into war willy-nilly. Weapons are ominous tools to be used only when there is no alternative, he said. We do not appear to have learned the lesson about there being an alternative, as so many of the current wars have been launched on some pretext or power grab. So where are these wars? There has been warfare somewhere in the world since 1816. If I asked you to name current global wars, you could probably immediately come up with half a dozen, and then by dredging through your memory, maybe another 3 or 4. But the Department of Peace and Conflict Research at Uppsala University in Sweden has been collating information on wars and conflicts for 40 years, called the Uppsala Conflict Data Program, or UCDP. According to UCDP figures, in 2024, there were over 90 state-based conflicts involving about 60 countries. The origins of some of these wars stretch all the way back in time to 1948 for the various Myanmar conflicts and the seemingly never-ending Arab-Israeli conflicts, with Palestine being the latest rendition. Since 2002, wars and insurgencies involving 15 countries in the Sahel region of Africa have taken nearly 500,000 lives. Estimates for the fatalities in Sudan and South Sudan from 2008 range as high as 1 million. The deaths in the Ethiopian civil conflicts are estimated to be over 500,000 since 2018, as are the estimated deaths in the Russia-Ukraine war. And there are always rumblings between India and Pakistan, which have concerned me for decades, as they are both nuclear powers. And so the list goes on, detailing the major and minor wars, a minor war being considered as under 10,000 fatalities per annum. But many of these wars also go back a long way, with millions having died over the years in, say, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and so many other countries, particularly with the ongoing battles with Islamic State insurgents. What UCDP describes as a conflict is when there are presently under 1,000 fatalities a year, and much of these are made up by the tail end of old wars and the numerous non-state violent conflicts, the drug wars, cartels, mafia, etc., much in Central America. And there are also over 80 one-sided conflicts, many being governments against civilians, insurgents. So war is an everyday existence for so many in the world. living in a peaceful country is something for the Gratitude Journal. So, who are the great military powers? Next to a battle lost, the greatest misery is a battle gained. So said the Duke of Wellington in 1817 after the Battle of Waterloo. France and Britain were the great military powers of that time, but every country has a life cycle from which they wax and wane. There are various annual rankings of military strength, but they all look at manpower, equipment, natural resources, finances, and geography, encompassing between 50 to 60 factors. According to the Military Institute for Strategic Studies, the number one military is, of course, the US, followed by China and then Russia, although some rankings have China and Russia at the same level. This group of three is considered the first tier of military might, and all are nuclear powers. The second tier is made up of India, then, surprisingly, South Korea. Next, no surprise, is North Korea and then Japan. Both India and North Korea are nuclear powers, but not South Korea and Japan, and hopefully they will retain their nuclear-free status despite the regional threats. The third tier in military might includes 7 countries: France, Pakistan, UK, Iran, Israel, Algeria and Australia, 4 of which are nuclear powers, and it may be 5 soon if Iran proceeds with its nuclear strategy. And on the list goes, enumerating the military power of 60 countries as listed in the 2025 Military Watch magazine. Ireland does not feature in that list, but appears in the global firepower rankings in the lower rungs at number 97 out of 145 countries. Of course, Ireland's claim to fame is as a defence force with many UN peacekeeping missions. Whilst undertaking research on global military power, I came across the US Index of Military Strength. What aroused my curiosity about this annual index was this document is published by the Heritage Foundation, the conservative think tank who created Project 2025. I thought this index would no doubt be viewed as essential reading in the current US administration. There is no shortage of words in the numerous documents produced for the index by the Heritage Foundation, which makes me think it is more of a talk tank than a think tank. But anyway, the conclusion outlined in the 2 2024 reports, Global Threat Level and An Assessment of US Military Strength, is that the US has to be combat ready to take on 2 MRCs, that's major regional conflicts, simultaneously or nearly simultaneously. Their assessment determined that the US faced major threats, particularly from Russia being considered hostile, with the lesser threats from China and Iran being assessed as aggressive and North Korea as testing, as in testing their patience maybe. Threats to US vital interests were categorized as high. The rankings for US military strength were either strong, marginal, weak, and very weak. The Army strength was considered marginal, the Navy as weak, the Air Force as very weak, despite all those Top Gun guys and global firepower assessing that the US had over 53% of the global total of combat aircraft. The Space Force was listed as marginal, America's nuclear capability also marginal, and only the Marine Corps considered strong. Notwithstanding the US being the biggest military spender in the world, within the forces, it concluded that the US military strength was at 2/3 the amount it should be, with US military power being designated as weak, and it did not have the capacity to fight two MRCs simultaneously. I took to wondering if it was this assessment of a high threat from Russia and the US military power being considered weak that led the US administration to abandon Europe and let Russia take out its hostility on the nearer arena, thus allowing the US to focus on the China threat, albeit considered a lesser one. The thinking may be to return Russia into a trading partner, and Europe is a trade competitor anyway, so let's wave them off. Ironically, one of the points made in the index was that the US does not have the luxury of focusing on only one geographic area. Its economy depends on global trade. It has obligations with many allies. We'll wait and see if the US focuses on the geographic area of the Americas to exert its influence, leaving aside Canada. Maybe we should offer Canada membership of the EU as a more natural alliance for it. So what are the weapons of choice these days? According to a recent report by the International Institute of Strategic Studies, the global defence expenditure reached $2.46 trillion in 2024. This marked an increase from $2.24 trillion in the previous year, bringing the average defence spending to 1.9% of global GDP in 2024, up from 1.8% in 2023 and 1.6% in 2022. Note, Ukraine has the highest GDP expenditure at nearly 35% in 2024. Israel is second at just under 9%. The US is the biggest military spender in the world, with expenditure close to $1 trillion, depending on what is being included, more than triple the amount of China, the second biggest spender. So what does traditional weaponry include? Well, there's the small arms and land-based weapons, ranging from handguns to tanks, rocket launchers to mines. The Control Arms campaign of Amnesty and Oxfam estimate that there are 640 million, some say 1 billion, small arms in circulation, and over 1,100 companies manufacturing them in nearly 100 countries. What a dispiriting thought. Other traditional weaponry includes the aerospace systems, that's military aircraft, conventional missiles, military satellites, naval systems, ships, aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, advanced anti-war defense systems. But the newest systems include unmanned systems like drones, and in Ukraine they're now making small ones out of cardboard. Cybersecurity, as in cyber weaponry, surveillance technology, software exploits, cyber attacks. But there's an even newer category: hypervelocity platforms. Missiles capable of travelling at hypersonic speeds above Mach 5, dodging defensive countermeasures. Russia has advanced capabilities, and China launched one that went at 19,000 miles per hour. That's 30,000 kilometres per hour, more than 20 times faster than the speed of sound. And AI weapons. But many leading scientists have grave concerns about their use, with those concerns about flawed reasoning plus a lack of accountability at the companies developing them. And let us not forget the arsenal of nuclear cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and gravity bombs, keeping company with chemical weapons, biological weapons, and even dirty bombs. The US and Russia collectively hold about 88% of the world's total nuclear arsenal and 84% of the warheads that are readily available for military use, in excess of 5,000 each. According to the Federation of American Scientists study, the 9 nuclear-armed nations collectively possess 12,331 warheads as of early 2025. Back in the 1980s, there were about 100,000 warheads, but the newer ones are considered much more effective. That's a euphemism for being more powerful, more bang for your buck, so to speak. Global conflict has even spilled out into space. The UK just installed Borealis to defend its satellites against threats. Many have been warning for years that space is no longer considered a benign environment. In 2021, a US general claimed that there were constant attacks on satellites, including jamming and cyber attacks. And in 2025, Major General Paul Tedman, commander of the UK Space Command, characterised space as increasingly contested. For the competing nations, it's the Wild West again, but this time the territory is space. These are considered the new national frontiers, where boundaries are blurred and have morphed from intelligence regions into potential warmongering domains, produced by institutions which in many cases have escaped the government noose into commercial entities with their own priorities, profit being one of them. Add to that nearly 13 million kilos of space junk just floating around, including a few old Soviet spacecraft which were nuclear powered. Eventually, this will all have to be dealt with. I have no desire to be watching Star Wars, the reality show. In the December 1980 penultimate episode of Carl Sagan's TV series Cosmos, Sagan looked at our place in the universe and the chances of another planet with intelligent life in our era. After eliminating a number of potential factors and arriving at a handful of planets, the final factor was whether the population was mature enough not to blow themselves up and destroy their planet. This reduced his assessment to 1 planet. That has stayed with me to this day. And the atomic scientists recently opined in their bulletin a new reality. Preventing nuclear war means preventing the use of nuclear weapons as both blackmail and bombs. The threat of use of nuclear weapons has become prevalent in some quarters. So where are we on the doomsday clock, a symbol created by Albert Einstein using the imagery of midnight equaling the apocalypse? According to the same bulletin of the atomic scientists, it is now 89 seconds to midnight since January this year. This is the closest the clock has ever been to catastrophe. And so who makes the money by supplying all this military weaponry? With global military spending at nearly $2.5 trillion, the 5 largest weapons manufacturers have about $200 billion in sales and are all from the US. Lockheed Martin, RTX Corporation, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and General Dynamics. Next is BAE, which is British Aerospace, then Rostec, which is French, and the following 3, making up the top 10 companies, are all from China. When it comes to the world's arms imports, India tops the poll with nearly 10% share of global arms imports. Saudi Arabia second and Qatar third with 8.4% and 7.6% respectively, and then Ukraine with just under 5% of imports. The list continues with Pakistan in fifth place, then Japan, Egypt, Australia, South Korea, and China at number 10, with just under 3% of arms imports. Ukraine and South Korea I can understand, but do all these other countries feel supremely threatened? And is anyone trying to make peace? In an Armistice Day speech on the 11th of November 1948, five-star General of the US Army Omar N. Bradley stated, "The world has achieved brilliance without wisdom, power without conscience. Ours is a world of nuclear giants and ethical infants. We know more about war than we know about peace, more about killing than we know about living." President Obama said something very similar when he visited Hiroshima in 2016. The United Nations was created in 1945 with a mandate to maintain international peace and security. But its mandate is not as secure as it once was. Do you remember the Miss World contestants used to be mocked for claiming that they'd like world peace, but it is a worthy aim. Over years, there's been a long list of peacemakers. We had the great liberator, Daniel O'Connell, who is said to have inspired Mahatma Gandhi to non-violent resistance. Martin Luther King Jr. said love was the foundation to reject revenge. Malala said, "Instead of sending soldiers, send teachers." And the Dalai Lama claims peace does not mean an absence of conflicts. Differences will always be there. Peace means solving these differences through peaceful means. Albert Einstein and Bertrand Russell created an anti-nuclear manifesto, signed by Einstein shortly before his death in 1955, highlighting the dangers of nuclear weapons. "Here, then, is the problem which we present to you, stark and dreadful and inescapable. Shall we put an end to the human race, or shall mankind renounce war?" Well, we're still deliberating on that one. Their manifesto also called for a conference to assess the danger of weapons, hence in 1957 the first Pugwash Conference, where scientists, scholars and public figures now meet annually in Pugwash, Canada, to discuss ways of diminishing the role of nuclear arms in international politics. And if you'd like to become a more active peace builder, take a look at the organisations, charities and thought leaders that conduct peace activities. For example, CEND is active in UK and Ireland, along with Amnesty, have the Elders, of course, which Mary Robinson is a leading figure, Greenpeace, Médecins Sans Frontières, to name a few. Or you can start your own peace initiative. I held a few peace poetry programs with music and poetry from a diverse group of peace activists, mostly from war-torn countries, an inclusive exercise supported by the local dean and also the Quaker movement, who are known for their peace activities. And there are those who are not so much the peacemakers, but the survivalists, those who can hunt, gather and survive relatively comfortably off-grid, and the preppers who stockpile months of food, water and supplies. There are even Irish preppers and survivalists. It's like they've found their tribe. The 1965 Irish booklet, survival in a nuclear war may be outdated now. But various European countries are sending out updated versions of survival manuals to their citizens. And there is a new EU preparedness strategy encouraging all to have a minimum of 72 hours of stocks. Having lived many years in the Caribbean in a hurricane zone, being hurricane ready every year was the norm, with a collection of supplies that included a battery radio and a cutlass. I'd add to that a solar phone charging unit now. But most importantly, there was cooperation with neighbours. We'd share the resources we had. I had a small pool, great for bucketing water for the loos, and an outside gravity-fed water tank, good for drinking water and outside showers. My neighbour had a generator, as she was determined to keep the ice flowing for the reviving drinks. We helped each other when there was a catastrophic storm, and other friends would make their way to our two houses at the end of a little road, clearing away any fallen trees to ensure we could get back on the move again. After our experiences of Storm Éowyn, circulating a Be Prepared booklet may be a good thing, and it would come in handy for any other prepping needs as well. Although most military historians maintain that threatening nuclear war is all bluff. I just hope they're right. Our wind predominantly blows from the southwest anyway, which is why West Cork was considered the second safest place in the world during the Cuban Missile Crisis of the 60s, and many mainland Europeans relocated there at that time. It helped make West Cork a vibrant community. And for 18 years, the Institute for Economics and Peace has issued an annual Global Peace Index, encompassing 163 countries. Iceland is number one as the most peaceful country on the planet. And guess which country is placed second as the most peaceful country in the world? Yes, you've guessed it, Ireland. I think we should celebrate that. This is Lynn, signing off from another episode of Truth Matters from my peaceful spot in the sunny southeast of Ireland, and thank you for listening. Until the next time.